This is Wandering Universe. In the last video, we explored the Moai statues that surrounded the coast and the inland region of Easter Island or Rapa Nui. Today, we are going to explore the largest volcano on the island, the Moai statues nearest to the extinct volcano, and the age of the statues themselves. So, let's go exploring. Okay, here we are. Now, as I showed you in the last video, this is Rapa Nui or Easter Island. This is the extinct volcano, the largest on the island. So you're seeing it from up in the air. Next is the coastal region of Easter Island. This would be possibly on, I think, the south side or the other side of the island. This is an extinct volcano, but I'll get into that shortly. So I'll show you the next volcano. This is the largest one, and that's the lake inside the crater of the volcano. So, this extinct volcano is called Rano Kau, as you can see here. It is 324 meters above sea level, and its age, according to the rocks surrounding the crater, between 150,000 and 210,000 years old. The lake inside the crater is about 100 meters above sea level, as you can see in this photo. Now I'll give you a daytime look. So that would be algae forming on the surface of the lake. This is the rocks on inside downward slope on the at the top surface, and then sloping on the other side, the outside of the crater. Now, the crater slopes downwards, as I've said, to the lake, and the rocks are mostly made up of basaltic lava. There are three types of rock that was formed from the lava flow during the Philistine age: basalt, obsidian, and I think it's pumice. That's what it's called. Now I'll show you another view of it. As you can see here, so this is the type of rocks, as I've mentioned earlier. I think that's basaltic rock. Okay. So, there are two other extinct volcanoes on the island. One is called Poki, which is this one. That would be further south from the largest extinct volcano. And then Terra Vaca. That will be on the, I think, on the other side on the island, kind of facing towards the largest volcano, as you can see here. They're not huge, but nevertheless, that's how they are today. So I'm just going to show you the map of Easter Island. As you can see, that's the one. This is another one. And I think that's one you see from the air. And I think the other one would be Poki. I could find it here. It's somewhere there. Exists in this region, as you can see here. And notice how the statues are all facing inland and some of them facing out to the sea. But I'll get into that in a little bit more detail later on. Okay, so in the last video I mentioned that the Moai statues were carved from tuff. It's compressed volcanic ash that spewed from a volcanic eruption. So I'm going to show you the quarried site. This is it here. Some tuff is comprised of basalt, which I'll show you. Here's an example. Trachyte, I think it's, or trachyte, I think it's called, which is this one, and scorio, which is a red tinge type of rock, as you can see here. Scorio is the red tuff, a soft red volcanic rock that was formed as parts of the lava flow. It is used in construction and sculpturing of the red hats on some of the Moai. It's also used on gas barbecue grills. Well, who knew that? Okay, so I'll show you. This is what I mean up here, and I showed you that in the last video. Kind of cute, these little hats they got on their head. It does makes their faces look cute, don't you think? Especially little pom pom on top of their head. Just a pity this one's yeah, kicked off its head, but nevertheless it's quite cute when you think about it. Okay, now you got to remember that each of the Moai statues, they weigh between 10 to 80 tons, okay, and their height is about 12 to 30 feet, and their biggest one stood at 70 feet and weighed 270 tons. So that's a real monster when you think about it. Now you got to ask yourself, during the time when the Polynesian people arrived and settled on the island and they began to domesticate themselves by forming a societal group in order to create these magnificent statues, you have to ask yourself how they did it. Now, you have to be skeptical, okay, according to what archaeologists and some scientists theorize, okay, from their preconceived ideas. Now, I'm going to show you a picture of a modern day crane, okay. Now, this is I think a terrain crane, or what I call truck cranes. It's actually lifting this statue. Now, this statue would be possibly 30 or 40 tons. So it's damn heavy to lift, even if it's just by humans alone. I mean, if you have a look at these construction workers, I mean, they're already pulling the statue to try and hoist it and level it and balance it so it stands on the little platform, as you can see here. So it's quite a manpower effort, as you can see here, especially using just this crane in itself. This is a modern day crane that you've seen around construction sites or in places. I've seen it outside an apartment building where they had to actually hoist and lift a cooling tower to put on top of a I think it was a 40-story apartment block in Melbourne. So I've seen it there. So you got to remember that these modern cranes weren't around back then, during the time of the Polynesian colonization. Okay, just food for thought there. Now, the terrain crane can lift between 50 to 160 tons, as you can see here. Now, the next one, I'll give you an example. This is one of those cranes, once again, lifting, coincidentally, a statue of Buddha, as you can see here. It probably weighs about 10 tons, 20 tons, something like that. Okay, I'm going to show you a modern crane. Now, you've seen these around for the past 20 years. I've seen them around, especially in Melbourne, Sydney, and in Brisbane, and possibly in Perth. You've seen these modern construction cranes when they're building high-rise apartments and office towers. Now, these construction cranes can lift between 50 to 300 tons. Okay, so that can be from steel frames to concrete blocks, glass windows, glass panels, cooling towers, you name it. They can lift up to 300 tons. So that's quite impressive for a modern day invention. Now, I'm going to show you an illustration of how in the past, we're talking about 1500 AD, in the past, how the Polynesian people managed to lift, hoist, drag, and maneuver these big beasties along the grassy plains from the quarry, pretty far away, all the way to the actual spot to, lift it upright. I mean, if you look at the manpower here, that's pretty significant, don't you think? That's a lot of time, a lot of energy, and a lot of strength. I mean, these people had to be very, very fit in order to lift such a sculptured statue such as this. Okay, so think about that for a moment. I mean, it must have taken like lots of people to really hoist this one statue up, and that could take more than a day. I reckon it would have taken about a week or two before they were ready and had enough energy and had a good night's rest to move the next big beastie along and stand it upright next to the one before it. So yeah, that could have taken a lot. That could have been very time consuming. So you got to ask yourself this: how is it possible, shown in this illustration, that these people could drag for miles from the quarry site all the way to the ahu, or platforms near the edge of the coastline? Now, how is it possible, using sleds, pulleys, ropes and logs, to hoist these giants onto the hard rock platforms through sheer manpower? I mean, how is it possible? Okay, and here is another illustration to demonstrate this, what I've been talking about in the last video and the previous video before that. I mean, that is a lot of takes a lot of energy just to even put one on top of the platform. Think about it for a moment. That could take more than a day. You know what I mean? It's from dawn till dusk. I mean, I know how they did it, but they must be really fit and strong in order to hoist just one 80-ton Moai statue on top of this platform. I mean, it just begs to differ. Okay, so you have to ask yourself, the technology that we're using today can differ from the technology they used back then. Now, I'm going to show you a map, okay? You might understand or comprehend what I've been trying to say here, okay? Now, this is a map of the Polynesian islands, okay? Now, I'm not talking about the Bermuda Triangle, okay? Let's just, you know, get this conspiracy theory out of the way for a moment. I'm talking about the mapping of the connection between these islands that stretch all the way to Rapa Nui, all right? Now, they are far apart from each other, but when you think about it, I mean, this map is not really drawn to perfect scale, but they are kind of in a way close to one another. Now, when you look at Easter Island and the other Polynesian islands, and I'm going to get into one of the Polynesian islands in another video. However, what I'm looking at is that a lot of these islands are actually have mountains below them, believe it or not, which are covered in water. So all you're seeing is just the very tip of the mountain. And as you can see, Rapa Nui is one of them. You can see the French Polynesia Islands, Samoa, Tonga, and, you know, Vanuatu, Fiji, and all the other islands are pretty much similar in that concept. So some of them would have volcanoes, some of them would have extinct volcanoes. Rapa Nui is one of them. So when you see the connection of where the people came from, I'm just leaving you a little bit of a teaser so that way you can think about it before I explain it in the next video. Okay, so this is just an interesting map that I've picked up, and it just shows you the distance between these islands and heading all the way to Rapa Nui. Do the statues have a connection with the French Polynesian Islands, or the Samoa, Tonga, and Solomon Islands? Well, I hate to say this, but the answer is yes. But I'll get into that in another video. Okay, so the voyage to take, that they would have taken, they say, 19-20 days, depending on weather conditions. Now, that's just getting, say, for example, from Chile to Rapa Nui. I'm not sure if they've done a voyage from French Polynesia all the way to Rapa Nui. I'm not sure. That could take maybe a month and a half, 2 months, just on those really big wooden canoes. That could, take several passengers on board, including the captain and its first mate, Polynesian style. What they would have done to get to Easter Island, they would have used a star map system. So I'm going to show you that in a moment. They would have used a star map system where they gazed up to the stars. They knew exactly where the planets aligned, the constellation, and they knew exactly how to map out their journey to head to Rapa Nui. It's quite fascinating. Till this day, there are very few people on this planet that are actual experts at star mapping when it comes to a sailed voyage. So, or should I say a sea voyage. So I'm going to show you the instruments, the modern day instruments, or the instruments that we used during Captain Cook's time and other naval voyage time that they use. For example, this is a sextant, I think that, or sextant, I think that's what it's called. That's what they use to gaze up to the stars, and this is how they measure their course. So that's what they used. Now I'll tell you a little secret how the Polynesian people actually navigated their way to find their destination, not just on star mapping alone. So I'll tell you that in another video. So this is what they used back then. This is an old compass, and as you can see, it tells you where north, south, east, and west is. And this is a star map, believe it or not. And this is what the Polynesian people used to sail across from one island to another. So it's incredible how they did it. I'm not sure how they were taught to gaze up to the stars and say, well, if you look at this star, it'll tell you go north, or you look at that star, it'll tell you go to southwest, or I don't know. So it's amazing how they did it back then. So that's the instruments that we used, a millennia later, but the Polynesian people used this without those instruments more than a millennia ago. So fascinating, really. It just blows my mind when I just find out how they actually trek the voyage, especially when you spend so much time alone out at sea. Very interesting. So gonna leave it as that, food for thought. And don't forget, I'm going to talk about in the next video about the Moai statues. So don't worry, I'm going to get to that. That's all for now.